Hello friends, welcome to the ATC Double Cut. In this episode, I want to remind you about something that is important when it comes to total organic material testing. This is something that I call OM246, and it's something that the United States Golf Association calls their new method of organic matter testing from the surface of golf course putting greens. It's something that in other parts of the world is called organic matter testing. And it's something specific that's a little bit different from your regular organic matter test that you see for soil organic matter on any kind of routine soil nutrient analysis. And in those types of routine soil nutrient analyses, when you do a soil test, they take out all of the living plant material, and they take out a lot of the dead plant material too. So when you're doing a soil organic matter test from a soil nutrient analysis, you are excluding, the tests are designed to exclude 100% of the living plant material or the living organic material, and they're designed to exclude a lot of the dead organic material, and that would be stuff like undecomposed stems or undecomposed rhizomes or undecomposed any kind of plant residue that will get discarded. Now, with this new type of testing, what I call OM246, we measure everything. We measure the humus, we measure the living roots, the dead roots, the thatch, the mat, everything. And this is something that is useful as a reminder, as a lot of people are completing or are doing now their spring in the Northern Hemisphere, their spring OM246 testing, or as you go through the year and think about how you're affecting organic matter and you're looking forward to the measurements that you might be making in the autumn of 2025, keep in mind that this method measures the living organic material too. As I do with all of the ATC Double Cut episodes, I will put a direct link to this post in the show notes so you can check it out and see the photos. The photo that I put here it starts off with a core, and this is a core of zoysia grass on a putting green. And this is a healthy bit of zoysia grass on a putting green because it's on a putting green. This particular plug was taken from a putting green that was supposed to be Bermuda grass, but this zoysia grass was invading the Bermuda grass green. Now, when you fertilize a green for Bermuda grass, you're going to be putting more nitrogen than you would if it was a zoysia grass green. So there was all kinds of living biomass, all kinds of living plant material in this particular zoysia plug that I took from the center of a Bermuda grass green. And if you look at the side view photo of this core, you can see some of the rhizomes and some of the roots going down the side of that cylinder of soil sample that was pulled out. And I then showed an image where I had sliced this at the 2 centimeter depth below the surface and prepared a plug that will be sent to the laboratory to measure 100% of the living and dead plant material that is right in that top 2 centimeters of the root zone. That's where the ball reacts. That's where so much of the sand top dressing that we apply ends up. That's where so much of the scarification work affects. That's where a lot of the holes that get punched are going to be dealing certainly with that layer and even going a little bit below it. And so in that core, I've taken that sample and I've cut it at the 2 centimeter depth, which is less than an inch below the surface. And then I flipped it upside down and I took a picture and looked straight down on it. So it's like if I was underground looking back up at the bottom of the grass plant. And there are all kinds of roots and rhizomes going down. And in the photo that I put in the blog post, I circled some of those in red. If the plant had less living plant material, if there were fewer of these roots and fewer of these rhizomes, when we measure this sample at the laboratory, we would get a lower organic material measurement, a lower OM2 measurement, because it's not only thatch, it's not only the bad kind of organic matter that we are measuring with this type of test, we're also measuring the good type of organic matter. And please don't let that discourage you about the value of this test. And I want to explain why this should not discourage you. Because this type of testing, when you hear me say this, you might say, well, if we can't tell the good from the bad, how do we make sense of these numbers? And the way that you make sense of these numbers is in a couple ways. First, when you do this testing for the first time, you will get a number that's going to instantly tell you how your organic matter content in your greens compares to other greens of the same species. That's how I show it on my reports. You can see an example of that on the OM246 project page on the ATC website. And you can see that when you do a test for greens of a particular species, you will be able to compare to how your greens compare to other greens in the database from that same species. Because I don't think it's particularly useful to be comparing Poa annua greens to seashore paspalum greens. One's a warm season grass, one's a cool season grass. One grows in what's going to be something similar to a 12-month growing season. One of them grows somewhere that usually has a winter. So it's not terribly useful to compare them. Of course, you can compare them. So you can compare how your greens and your species composition, how greens of that species composition compare to your greens. And you can also compare the results from your greens to all the other greens in the world. So that's interesting, but it's hard to make a decision based on that, because just because your greens are higher than average or lower than average, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to stop coring or that you need to come in and do a whole bunch of dry ejecting or anything. Where you make the decision about how much sand top dressing to apply and how to adjust that, or whether you need to dry eject or whether you need to solid tine or core or whatever, where you make that decision, that comes when you test for a second time. And when you test for a second time, now you'll see how things have changed over time. And when you see how things have changed over time in response to the work that's been done and in response to how the grass has grown over that time period between the two tests, that's where you can make some decisions. You can start to make some decisions about adjusting the sand top dressing rate and about adjusting the type of disruptive cultivation practices. So that is the two ways that you can make sense of the data, even though it is measuring both the living and the dead. I don't think we ever want to define a particular value and say we always want bent grass greens to be between 4 and 6%. I've said many times that I don't think that's the right approach. The way that I think we might define it is you find that your greens perform really well at 5%. And then we just say, okay, let's keep our greens at 5% for this golf course, for this type of sand type, for this type of infiltration that we have through the sand, for this type of bent grass, and for this type of management method in the particular climate that you're in. Then you may find that 5% is a really good value, and then you just keep it at that over time. So then you adjust the top dressing. Again, it doesn't matter so much about the living and the dead plant material, whether some of it's living, some of it's dead. You just adjust that total number to stay as consistent as possible over time. And probably you would also be trying to make it consistent from green to green across your property in order to create the most consistent playing surfaces. But there is one thing that I think is important to consider in relation to this over time sampling, and it's related also to this living and dead plant material aspect of the testing. And that is that you might have different amounts of living and dead plant material at different times of the year. And that's why I recommend being consistent with your sampling date. Because specifically, I recommend doing sampling within the same 2-week window every year if you can. If you're on an annual sampling plan, let's say that you sample every April and you sample April 20th in 2024. Well, if that's the case, in 2025, I'd try to sample sometime in the April 13 to April 27 type of time window. And that gives you a direct comparison without any seasonal differences. But if you happen to test in April and then you said, okay, I want to go check and see how things have changed, so you test again in July, well, now you're in a different season and the plant may have different allocation of resources to the roots or to the underground plant parts or to the above ground plant parts. So you could be changing some of that living and dead organic matter. And that change is a seasonal effect and not really a real change in the organic matter that you are most concerned about. So if you do, for example, a July testing, then test it again July after July after July. And I usually recommend autumn sampling in most places. If you do autumn sampling, you're able to do the testing at the end of most of the growth through the year. And then I just recommend testing autumn after autumn after autumn. Some people like to test multiple times per year. And if that's the case, you would be comparing spring to spring to spring to spring as you go year after year. And you might test in the summer also, but you'd get the most value from comparing the summer sampling to the next summer sampling and again to the next summer sampling, rather than comparing spring to summer to autumn and making quick decisions about how to adjust sand top dressing or how to adjust cultivation based on seasonal changes. So that's something that is somewhat related to this blog post about the living and the dead plant material, because you do find anybody growing Poa annua or pretty much any kind of grass, you'll tend to see seasonal changes in the root system. And sometimes the roots get scarily short. Sometimes the roots grow exceedingly long. And that changes through the year. And you're measuring a bit of that when you're doing the OM246 testing. And I put at the end of this post, I said, now for a bonus item. And I shared a video where I had a chat with Andrew McDaniel, who's been doing this OM246 testing for 8 years. So if you want to see something really interesting and hear from a golf course superintendent who's been having great results with these type of tests and making decisions that have how would I describe it? Surprising results. The results have been surprisingly good in making decisions based on OM246 testing that has allowed the surfaces to really be superb with an amount of sand and with an amount of cultivation that I didn't think was possible. I always thought we needed to do a little bit more than what Andrew has been able to get by with. And it's not just get by, because the surfaces actually get better and better and better, and the organic matter doesn't change very much. And so Andrew and I had a chat about that for about 10 minutes, and we recorded that as a little video that you can watch. I put a direct link to that in this post, and I'll try to put a direct link to that in the show notes for this show also, so that you can have a look at that when you have time. That is something that I think is worth being aware of, because if you can get those results at your facility where you're only top dressing a few times a year and yet the organic matter is going down rather than going up, that might surprise you. And that is something that you can only find out if you're actually measuring that total organic material. So that's something that if you haven't done this yet, and I know there's still some people out there that don't have these numbers, and they're still making decisions about top dressing and coring without these numbers, I suggest that it's a lot easier to do this work and to make sure that you're doing enough of it. It's so much easier to do if you have these OM246 data. So if you haven't done it yet, you know how to do it. You can get in touch with me. You can get in touch with other labs that do it. You can get in touch with your USGA agronomist, and they can help you get this testing done. So anyway, have a great time until the next episode. I'm recording this from a island in southern Thailand where I happen to find myself now. And I appreciate you listening and watching. And I look forward to sharing more turfgrass information with you again soon. For now, I'll sign off for ATC. I'm Michael Woods. Bye-bye.